Hello, everyone. I hope all of you have been taking in the valuable insights that were shared so far today. It is now my pleasure to introduce what is sure to be another thought-provoking panel. As we speak of our changing economic landscape and the challenges and opportunities that come with it, we must focus on the impact of climate change and the economic downturn on the critical infrastructure that powers our economy and shapes all our lives. Next, our panelists will be addressing this very topic. As a telecommunication company, this is that we are part of a wider network of organizations housing critical infrastructure. Cogeco grapples with these concerns every day. However, like every challenge, there is also room for opportunity. And as decision makers, we must explore how we can innovate in building infrastructure and partnerships that emphasize decarbonization and sustainable practices. Altogether, we must take concrete steps to help prevent the most damaging effects of climate change. But how can we act as a real catalyst of change to address these challenges? As the panelists will discuss, the successful transition towards clean energy depends on the right technologies, but also on the development of many infrastructure requirements. Because Cogeco is a key player in Canada's critical infrastructure, providing a vital connectivity to so many customers, businesses, and communities, I've asked myself often, how can we do better? A few months ago, the Montreal Economic Institute released a paper finding that adoption of broadband technology can help in the fight against climate change. The study finds that by using broadband internet, businesses are able to reduce their carbon footprint and help the environment. In particular, if Canada wants to achieve its ambitious 2030 emission targets, amounting to the reduction of around 300 million tons of CO2 equivalent, and that's based on 2019 emission levels, it will need all industries to proactively contribute, including the telecom sector. Deploying IT technologies can result in a more efficient use of energy by reducing the amount required to deliver a product or service. And this is where we come in. The telecommunication industry has a key role and a responsibility to contribute to a fairer society and its economic development. We can participate actively in making a stronger world by reducing the need for transportation and in promoting digital inclusion to drive equitable growth. And as the theme of this forum goes, we have to realize opportunities with resilience. Cogeco aims to reduce its environmental footprint by targeting net zero emissions across its value chain, while advocating for competitive policies that stimulate investments and can ease the rising cost of living that our communities face. This is no easy feat, but as industry leaders, we must collaborate to realize these goals, and as we establish value and reliable partnerships with all our stakeholders. We also see our networks and services as tools others can leverage as part of their own efforts to reduce emissions by allowing enhanced collaboration over long distances, helping build and foster a sense of connection while reducing the impact of travel. And we try to leverage our business to help building a diverse and a resilient system of suppliers who, in turns, will make their own contribution and innovations towards solving the challenge we all face together. I'm now very curious to see what our panelists will share, and I thank you for a chance to be part of this discussion. Thank you. Merci.
You know, the topic of resiliency, of inclusion, really looking forward to the discussion with the panelists here today. And really just want to, for those of you who are not familiar with Export Development Canada, we're here to help companies succeed on the international stage, whether through it's our knowledge products, financing, insurance, connectivity, and market. We're here to help. And what's good is we talk about infrastructure today and the challenges facing the planet. We've got, I think, air, land, and sea covered here with my panelists here today. So looking forward to the discussion. Going from my immediate side here all the way on, we have Neil Pakey, so Chief Executive Officer of Nieuport Aviation, Ian Hamilton, Chief Executive Officer of the Port Authority of Hamilton-Oshawa, and Olivia MacAngus, President of Colliers Project Leader. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn it over to you to do a quick intro on yourself, but then also what's top of mind for you right now before we get into the questions. You get to go first.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Neil Pakey. You'll soon gather I have a bit of a Scottish twang coming from Scotland. And I've been here 5 years as the CEO of Nieuport Aviation. Nieuport Aviation is the owner and operator of the passenger terminal at Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport, and we're owned by a pension fund, IEFA, so represent many thousands, millions of Canadian families in our business, and we're in strong partnership, I should say, with Ports Toronto. It's like a P3 model, and we operate very consistently and together on many projects with Ports Toronto, so who own and operate the whole port, including the overall airport. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. I'm Ian Hamilton from the Hamilton-Oshawa Port Authority, and we're the largest port authority in the on the Great Lakes in Canada, and we have operations in Hamilton-Oshawa. And now, most recently, we're developing operations in Niagara. We handle about 11 million tons of cargo per year, which represents about $4 billion in value. And the jobs connected with that cargo amount to about 40,000 in the province. And the gross national product connected to it is about $6 billion per year. Port authorities, we're one of 17 port authorities in the country. They are fundamentally government enterprises, so we're for profit and we're meant to be self-sustaining. And we ourselves represent. We have about probably 1,500 acres of property under our management now, with about 650 ships coming through every year. So our mandate is really to develop trade, support supply chains, and do everything we can really to support the maritime industry. Thanks.
Thank you. Olivia.
Hi there, I'm Olivia MacAngus. I lead Colliers Project Leaders. And so what can I tell you about our business? You know how construction projects always seem to go to hell? Well, ours don't. And so we represent owners across the country and in the Middle East, primarily as an owner-side construction project manager, but we have ancillary services as well to help our clients. We're delivering several $1 billion of capital every year for our clients in a variety of sectors, everything from renewables all the way through to community infrastructure, to economic infrastructure. And so we have been in operation. We're a homegrown Canadian company. We've been in operation for almost 35 years and now have offices pretty much anywhere you can imagine across the country and even up into the north. So very happy to be here. And, we are committed to continuing to deliver on our mission of making the communities of tomorrow better places for our community members.
Great, thank you for that. Now, Ian, I think I'm going to start with you on the first question here. And as we talk about infrastructure needs and climate resilience, in the face of climate change, what critical infrastructure needs are you seeing at the national level? How can these investments enhance our climate resilience while helping to promote economic growth?
Thanks. So probably one thing we learned during COVID was how important our supply chains were, and we probably took a lot of them for granted for many years. And when we saw them break down, we realized what kind of impact it was having on us on a day-to-day basis. In addition, supply chains represent about 80% of all of the greenhouse gas emissions on the planet, with 15% of that contributed to transportation, and that's according to a McKinsey study done a few years ago. So in terms of our investments, I think it's what we're really looking at doing is investing in infrastructure that builds supply chain resilience and supply chain sustainability. Two very important subjects that are front of mind right now. I also, when you look at Toronto, which is one of the fastest growing regions now in all of North America and the fourth largest economy, we realize that the congestion, particularly around the airports in Toronto, is one of the worst in all of the North Americas. So it makes a lot of sense of how do we build this resilience. So where we're looking at, other than our own operations and looking at sustainable ways to build shore power for the vessels, to invest in technologies that help us with stormwater management, dealing with higher dock walls to build resilience when the water levels are going up and down. One of the real key areas that we want to look at is how do we take advantage of the capacity available on the Great Lakes today for moving more cargo by marine. Each vessel has the ability to take about 900 plus trucks off the road and then reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 90% versus the ground transportation. So where we're looking at is saying how do we make investments both in the land side but also in the marine side, investing in the right ships. I think Lake Ontario and the Great Lakes is a wonderful spot for operating with autonomous vessels, and certainly a great spot because of the shorter distances going with the carbon neutral vessels. So this is where we're putting our focus and see where the real investment and the real opportunity is. So it's when you think of the number of vessels, and as I said, we do 600 vessels per year, and you look at the number of trucks that represents and the impact it can have when you've got limited capacity on your roads today, limited capacity on your rail, and a lot of 50% capacity on the Highway H2O, which is how we describe the system that runs from the St. Lawrence River into the Great Lakes. That's where our opportunity sits, and I think that's where we personally feel that our responsibility lies in terms of making those investments, both from a sustainability but also from a supply chain capacity side.
Okay, great. And Olivia, I'll continue with you from your perspective. Where are you seeing these infrastructure needs in your world?
Yeah, well, I think, as a starting point, we've really seen an evolution over the last number of years, and the markets are really driving, I think, a behavior that is very positive, which is companies starting to take a look at what are their plans around greening and decarbonization, ESG strategies. It's becoming a lot more commonplace. A decade ago, this was kind of a way out there thinking, but now publicly traded companies in particular have a lot of pressure to begin to think about that, funds as well. And so we do start to see quite a lot of now targets being set, which is great. That's the first step, is to start to identify, what can we do to improve the situation. But then also beyond that, starting to think about actually getting some movement and some implementation of some of these greening projects to improve our carbon footprint. I also think that, beyond the decarbonization side of things, we are seeing a ton of movement because a lot of infrastructure in this country is government owned. So municipal infrastructure, provincial infrastructure, federal infrastructure. We also see like a much more concerted approach to get into capital planning, longer term capital planning, which did not exist a decade ago. We start to see portfolio-based thinking around, how do we make portfolio decisions to green our infrastructure? What kinds of policies can we put in place to ensure that we are taking actionable steps? What kinds of funds are being put in place to support these investment decisions? And that's all very, very very positive. So I think that the confluence of those two things is resulting in meaningful action. On the other side of things, we see what happens in a changing climate situation when when that happens, there's a lot more pressure on the existing infrastructure. So a lot of what we are seeing across the country is really a reaction to the changing climate situation and the impact and the strain that that is putting on our existing infrastructure, and the need to build in climate resiliency for future infrastructure investments, as well as taking concrete measures to shore up existing infrastructure, critical infrastructure. We've seen in the last couple of years, like some pretty big infrastructure failures where we have had big, incidents either with floods or fires or other disasters.
Oh, great. And Neil, I'm going to ask you the same, but I'm going to tag on to that. So
Yeah.
one of the comments that you made, and it's important as well. I heard the comment made earlier, like a lot of folks commit to 2050 strategies because you're not going to be around at that time. But it's important in the meantime that
Yeah.
we measure our work, we measure our progress. We have KPIs. So we'd like to hear your response in terms of areas of opportunity, but also would like to get your 2 cents on, how do you measure the impact, and maybe what are some of the KPIs that you're leveraging within your organization?
Okay, I'll thank you. I'll start with just the need question. Interesting. We actually, as an airport and as airports, tend to listen to them, to the market, listen to others when they're describing what the needs are for travel, for connectivity. And we hear that from the government that there's the target is for 60 million more tourists into Canada, for example, by 2030. We see all the policies around encouraging immigration, and when immigration comes, you want to encourage friends and family to come and go back and forth, etc. So there's a lot of reasons, and there's the social reasons as well. I mean, I went to Sioux Lookout 2 weeks ago, and the need there for air connectivity to cities like Toronto is massive for them in terms of being able to access business and visiting friends and relatives, etc. And then even the medical industry as well. We have a great business at the airport, Orange, and it's great when you actually look out the window and you can see this is an operation that's saving people's lives. So you have many needs for the airport, and there's many. All the stats show that the need for the airports is growing and growing. There's 28 billion ready to be invested over between now and 2030. If not ready to be invested, it's a need that we know that there should be this investment into airport capacity just in Canada. And then when it comes to the climate side, change side of it, there's also a McKinsey report that says there's a need for between 66 billion and 114 billion globally, and just to get to a place where we're looking at renewable propulsions of aircraft. And it's sort of so for the needs side, it kind of starts there in a way. Like I think the biggest impact will be sustainable aviation fuels and the development of that. But going to your question of the here and now, rather than like let's leave this till 2049. Nobody can leave it to 2049 to deliver a strategy for 2050. You have to start now. We've started. We've commenced. With electrification of the bus services. Delegates here physically may have been on our bus, which goes from here to Billy Bishop Airport. And that's going to be electric by the end of the year. We're inspired by Ports Toronto, who electrified their ferries. And that means we're probably the only airport commercially in the world that will have all its public transport will be electric. First one. And it's no coincidence that we're also perhaps the greenest airport in Canada anyway, because of the percentages of people that actually walk to take their flight from here. The ground emissions from those people, well, it's good, it's healthy, it's long, it's long term, and we have a lot of policies around that to encourage that, and that's why we put on free bus services as well. And then we've got bullfrog power in now, so that's really helping on renewable energies as well. So there's things you can do now. We work with our supply chain as well to help with that delivery on the need. But to your point on metrics, well, we have scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. Lowest hanging fruit, scope 1, get those in order. And now we're working extensively on scope 3. So it's really about that. We've also find your own goals. We have an ACI, is the Airports Council International Trade Body. They have ACI carbon accreditation. So we'll start a program to get to best in class and get recognized as best in class. And yeah, lots to do, working with the supply chain, as I say, working with airlines as well. We'd like to get more renewable aircraft into the airport. We can't do that. So actually some of that hard stuff in terms of infrastructure investment depends on policy and government policy in aviation. And at the moment, our agreement doesn't permit us to get more renewable fuels in. And I've got an airport group down in Australia, in Queensland. They're really making good progress on sustainable aviation fuels. We're learning from them because they're going to step ahead of us. But we need to get our policy in place here, called the tripartite agreement. We need to get it in place so that we can actually get on and start working as leaders in the field to get renewable energies sources and renewable fuels into our airport.
So I can attest to the fact I'm one of the people who's walked to the airport on several occasions. No, first airport I've walked to, right? And it's so convenient. So I can see where you save on the carbon footprint. And you kind of touched on the next question. And I'm going to come back to you on this one, Olivia. So when you look at like the projects that are existing, and we talked about electrification on the buses here, you know, in what ways can decarbonization and sustainable practices be integrated into some of these existing projects you may have on the go, or projects that you may have upcoming as it relates to achieving our environmental goals?
Yeah. Well, we have, again, I think that we're making a lot of progress. There's a long way to go. But we've definitely seen a lot of things come through in procurement policy around, green requirements. So we see BOMA certification requirements. We see lean certification requirements. There's almost if you look at provincial assets in this province, for example, like the vast majority of provincially procured large assets have requirements around their energy usage. There's long-term energy usage guarantees baked into the contracts with performance penalties associated. So there definitely is a huge amount of progress being made when we think about the way that we are developing infrastructure. But we're kind of entering this unprecedented time because while we've had this big shift towards beginning to be conscious of this and trying to figure out how we work this into our infrastructure needs and how we get our infrastructure needs to reflect the direction that we want to go in, and there has been investment dollars associated with that, we're kind of entering this time of economic uncertainty. So, it still remains to be seen what impact that's going to have when you've got all of a sudden looming recession concerns. You've got a high interest rate environment that's putting a lot of pressure on pro formas and private development deals. You do see like a real estate activity kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. And so, in that kind of environment, I think the question becomes, can the overall economics hang together? And what do we need to do to be able to ensure that we continue to move forward in a progressive direction? So a lot of, our clients, we do a lot of public sector work just because there's a lot of public infrastructure needs still in this country. We have a huge infrastructure gap. And so when we look at our clients, many of them on the public sector side continue to implement their policies. We have not seen any pullback in terms of the direction that they are heading in. On the private sector side, really, still, you do see a lot of focus on secure investments, right? So higher standards around the assets result in somewhat better long-term economic outlooks on those assets. And so there still is a balance there that we've got to figure out how that's kind of going to play out. But I would say on balance, I'm actually pretty pretty positive still on the trend that we're seeing in the Canadian market around thinking, how will we progress? And I think a lot of that is still being driven corporately by shareholders that are taking a stand. We see even things like green bonds that are making progress in the Canadian market. And then also we've got just a lot of institutional owners in this market who have made policy directions that are still leading us in the right direction. So on balance, I would say still going pretty well.
Love it. And Ian, how about for you? When you look at your operation today, how are you integrating the sustainable and decarbonization practices into upcoming projects in your world?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we view ports as more than just a spot for cargo to pass through, and very much that's the model on the East Coast and the West Coast. But once you get into sort of into the Ontario ports, then you're dealing more with a destination port. So we view them as much more as a multimodal hub for supporting industry. The idea being that we're going to try to process the goods right at the port facility to eliminate one of those transportation moves. We've got some wonderful examples in Hamilton where we've seen a sugar refinery come in. So the sugar gets imported in, refined into a liquid or a hard product, and then sent off to the manufacturer. Similarly, there's a flour mill, Parrish and Heimbecker built the first flour mill in Ontario in 75 years in Hamilton. And again, the wheat comes in directly and then is processed right there to support the local industries. So we really see that idea of creating a hub where you're tying together both the transportation and the manufacturing side really helps to minimize the amount of times that goods are moved and the emissions that they create. Now, I think Philippe is gone, but although I don't think we're going to transportation's get completely replaced by broadband. But we do think that the less we touch and less we move around the product, then the stronger supply chains and more resilient supply chains from a sustainability perspective we can make. So now we've invested in manufacturing probably close to or beat ourselves and our tenants in the last decade about $500 million on our different facilities, which really drives the economy, keeps supply chains as simple and as straightforward as possible, and reduces the costs and the emissions associated with them.
And Neil, can give you an opportunity. Is there anything that you wanted to add in terms of any additional projects where you've seen the opportunity to decarbonize or integrate sustainable solutions?
Yeah, we absolutely. We are. I like your point, Ian, about the hub and the connectivity. That's really what a lot of our market is, because we actually get a lot of people coming from Thunder Bay, coming from all over Canada, and coming from the US points on the East Coast as well, and they hub over us to get elsewhere, and they come into Toronto maybe overnight here as well. So there's that's why we stimulate $2.5 billion to the economy here, which is actually more than several. It's actually more than the film industry. Even I support absolutely the film industry, but it just shows you the measure of how much importance we can have on the economy here. And going to your projects point, one of the key projects we have at the current time is the US pre-clearance project, which the government are supporting us to the tune of $30 million into that. But that's going to really open up the US market for us. We've got 5 cities at the moment where we have direct services, and that's going to multiply 2-3-fold. And then when you look at that, it's going to stimulate the economy from 2.5 to 4.5 or nearly 5 billion to the economy here. So, that's a big project. It gives you the great opportunity, knowing what we know now, to actually do it right and to make sure that the whole supply chain for that project, everything like we did with Bullfrog Power with the buses, everything we can ensure maximum sustainability with a project of that size.
I'm going to continue with you, Neil. We talked a bit about inclusivity and the importance of that, and from your perspective, when you look at these infrastructure projects, how do we, and these large ones especially, how can we engage local communities? How can we ensure inclusivity and the work we're doing as these new projects and initiatives come to market?
Yeah, I actually see a change from, I mean, I've been in the industry for 40 years, and I see a change that has happened over that time, and is happening still. And I think with communities, it's kind of in the past been a bit of an afterthought. And I don't mean that it's not been a thought. The process was like the airport does its forecast, and then you realize what the demand is, etc. You focus on the passenger experience, and perhaps the focus in the past a bit more on the passenger experience than the community. Now, often the two are the same, because you walk to the airport, so the community is in fact the passenger, but often they're not. Often the community are the businesses or the residents and the schools, etc. And I say the process maybe been, here's all the plans, now let's consult. Let's consult with the community kind of after all the plans have been made, and then there's the interaction, the road shows and whatever, and you take on board. I'm not saying you don't take on board the feedback. You take on board the feedback, and I've done several in different cities, and you take on board the feedback. You modify the plans and stuff. But maybe where we've learned is actually to try and get the right community involved from the get-go, from earlier on, and in doing so, you get more engagement, more alignment. And more buy-in, frankly. And you look at our community here, we have 85% of our community, the residential community, support the development of the airport. It's fantastic. I ain't seen that in my previous airports in Liverpool and Manchester and wherever else. And I think, well, great. Our community actually love us here. And a lot of people, you walk down the waterfront here and the feedback's tremendous. And so you kind of think, okay, we've got to here's this community, what do they want? So we're doing much more now in terms of events, in terms of community support, getting the schools on board, and with big plans there. Heritage, we actually sit across from two parks, Ireland Park and Norway Park. Both of them have aviation histories. The Norwegians actually came here to Toronto, and it's called Norway Park because the Air Force came in Canada like they do now. Open doors, we welcome you. You can be Canadians of the future. And marriages were made, and there's a strong community here. And we're actually now talking to the Norwegians about what do we do with your park, like to try and lift it, to try and get more community involvement in the airport. And there's so many great communities around here that we have a great opportunity. It's great fun. One of the reasons I came is just for all that. And I have to say the credit to our partner Ports Toronto with RJC, so the chief exec there. I think there's a bit of a like-minded thing going on here, because when you get people on the same page with the same drive and the same goals, you can actually do things and make things happen. And there, when I saw all the things that Ports Toronto are actually doing with the community, I thought, wow, that's something. And I think it's really a case of putting our things together plus their things, and then adding to it. And we've got some great ideas for future events and things. So.
No, thank you again. And what about from your perspective? If you look at local value, if you look at community engagement, if you look at inclusivity, how does that tie into your infrastructure work when we talk about sustainability?
Yeah, thanks. One of our key drivers is that we really want the communities that we operate in to be proud to live in port cities, but it does come with a fair amount of challenge, because fundamentally many of these communities, like Hamilton, really exist there because of the port, and they built around the port. And at one stage, the gentrification of the industrial Hamilton means that there's a lot of pressure on the facility. So as Neil talked about, it's really about forward-looking consultation and understanding what can we do to minimize the impact on the communities and stay as aligned as possible with the municipal and regional governments that we work with, to ensure that our goals and what we're trying to do is as close as possible aligned with what they want to achieve in their own communities. So that's the other, and then there's some smaller things that we do, which are very, very important. We really try to make sure that interface between the industrial operations and the actual residential and the recreational areas are as soft as possible. And that includes some fencing, sound attenuation, possibly creating some parklands and some berms in between. So again, it's really that thoughtful approach to how do we respect the communities we live in and interface. We also found it's very important for people to understand the value and how important transportation and supply chains are, so that when they do see us not necessarily just as a necessary evil, but they understand that, you know, a lot of their jobs and a lot of their income is dependent on these goods being able to move around and the transportation of these goods. So it's we've got a wonderful team led by Larissa right here, and she really does a great job in making sure that our communities appreciate the work that we're doing and how it impacts them, and we're very respectful for things that we do with them. The other area is a smaller side, but we do make fairly substantial investments in trying to support both charitable but also recreational facilities in our areas, to try to illustrate to the community that they are very important to us. But again, it is one of our driving areas to have our communities be proud to live in port cities, and it's not without its challenges, but I think with the right forward-looking communication and consultation, it's certainly possible.
Great. And Olivia, I know before this, we were chatting about this question a little bit. And even when you look at the inclusivity lens, when you look at underserved markets, when you look at the Indigenous community and how that ties in as well. So I'd love to get your perspective.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I can tell you a little bit about that. We do a lot of work in Indigenous community. We do a lot of work across the country in all kinds of communities, but in particular, we have built excellent relationships in Indigenous communities across the country. And it is one of the areas where, we have recognized that in order to achieve success in the implementation of infrastructure projects in communities, we actually need to step back for a minute and understand the why of the work that we are doing in the communities, and set ourselves up so that we have a good understanding of the dynamics of the community that we're operating in, to be able to achieve the outcomes that ultimately the community members are looking for. So I can talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing. We primarily have kind of started out delivering community-based infrastructure. So water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, community centers, some housing projects, band offices, and other types of community infrastructure. And like with any other community infrastructure project, the real challenge is not in the technical delivery of the asset. The real challenge is in bringing the leadership together so that there's a shared vision of the outcome that is going to be delivered, and how the community is going to operate with that infrastructure. And oftentimes, these projects that are being done, especially in Indigenous communities, it'll be the first time that in that community such a piece of infrastructure has been delivered. So, we have challenges to overcome in terms of people's understanding of, what is going to be the improvement to the day-to-day in the community, but also, oftentimes there isn't a resident knowledge of how to deliver that infrastructure. There isn't resident knowledge of how you're going to operate that infrastructure once it's delivered. And that is a huge challenge for the communities, especially in our north. And plus on top of that, you see, a lot of issues related to climate change, ground heaving and things like that, where, we really have to think further ahead to, how are we going to design this infrastructure to achieve the needs of the community, not just today, but actually over the 30 or 50-year life of that piece of infrastructure. So when we go into communities, one of the things we're really focused on, especially in Indigenous communities, is to get the stakeholders of the project together to co-develop the outcomes that we're looking for in that piece of infrastructure. So we really are looking for the community voice to be represented at the table where we're making decisions. And we use processes where we can help the delivery teams, so the design teams and the construction teams, to work with the community to come to decisions about how that infrastructure is going to be developed to meet their needs. And one of the things with it, those kinds of community infrastructure projects is there's often a third-party funder of those projects. So it's so whereas the community actually needs that infrastructure and will be using that infrastructure, and we want their input, there's a third party that has the financial decision-making authority or constraints related to that infrastructure. So those are all challenging dynamics. One of the big takeaways for us as a business that we have learned is that, we really didn't know enough about the communities in which we were operating. And so we have spent the last several years beginning to educate ourselves, beginning to educate our workforce on the history of Canada and Indigenous peoples, and really beginning to create an awareness and a sensitization to some of the challenges that people are going to be facing when you're going into communities to help them deliver these assets, and develop a shared understanding of how we're going to move forward together towards reconciliation, in part through the delivery of better infrastructure in the communities. So that's been a project that we've been working to develop our own awareness and our own steps that we can take towards contributing to reconciliation. I think it's been a huge passion project. It's, we see amazing outcomes. We just 10 days ago, we're recognizing National Day for Truth and Reconciliation with our teams. And we had many of our young project managers who are doing work in communities speak to the team on a webinar. There's 800 or so of us now. And so they were talking about their experiences and, what it means to the community members, what it means to them. And I think that if we can build that shared understanding, we really get towards much better infrastructure for the communities.
No, agreed. And funny, even with a lot of our international work at EDC, these Indigenous communities exist throughout.
Yes.
And this community engagement is so key in everything that we do. In addition to, I'll say what we bring as Canada is our ESG standards as well. So I'm going to ask you all a off-script question to kind of like wrap things up selfishly for me here with our work in the Indo-Pacific. And a lot of people don't realize not only is it a great opportunity for the export of goods to that market, but also infrastructure is where we have significant investments.
Yeah.
So ports, airports, roads, you name it from an infrastructure perspective. We are heavily invested as Canada, and EDC is behind supporting a lot of that. But what I wanted to get from each of you quickly before we wrap, if you look at your areas of expertise and your organizations and what you represent, what would you say is, one of the, key differentiators? What is one of the key areas where you see Canada having a competitive advantage in each of your respective fields? Just quick fire. What do you think we can bring value to the global market here as it relates to your work? Mm-hmm. Should I put you on the spot first?
Okay. What's the most advantage? Okay, well, one thing I've noticed here from working in the UK, working in Ireland, and working elsewhere, one thing that Canada does a lot.
Say thank you.
Properly is I think working with the ESG agenda and the DEI, the diversity agenda. And I think I'm blessed because my team speaks 18 languages. There's only 31 of them. Speaks 18 languages, and I think can identify as 17 different nationalities, and that within one generation. So it's kind of like amazing, and I think that really brings a lot to bear when we think about our future planning and projects, etc., and infrastructure investment, and just our culture. I think culture is really amazing, and with culture you can do so much. It gives you the freedom as a leader to be to express yourself, and everybody else express themselves, and you can make such great inroads here. The less internal politics, the better.
So culture is something we can definitely bring. Ian, how about for you in terms of a differentiator for us in market?
Well, I think that the Canadian brand is very strong, and I'll talk particularly around agriculture and the agriculture products grown in Ontario. And in the last decade, we've built 3 terminals in Hamilton and Oshawa for handling of grain exports. and discovered, particularly when you see the volatility that the Russian invasion of Ukraine created around the agricultural supply chains and the flows, how easy it was for Canadians to actually export their product, and it's been properly inspected. It again, it has a very, very high standard, but unless we've got reliable supply chains of ways to get it out of the country, then actually we lose out on that incredible advantage that we've got, which is again why we've invested so much into the agricultural infrastructure to support Ontario farmers in exporting their products.
Thank you. And Olivia.
Well, I was going to say, we Canada, little country, not geographically, but big heart, and we have really built some huge success stories in the infrastructure space here in Canada. I think about our global pension funds, which are some of the largest investors globally in infrastructure. I think of our Canadian design firms, which are leading global practices in design. Some of our larger construction companies, which are beginning to move out into the American markets. I think about, in the real estate space, our own space. We've got some huge global companies that are homegrown here in Canada. So I think there's a ton that we can export. I think we do a great job thanks to also organizations like EDC that support us to do that. And I'm looking forward to continuing to build even more around, especially around innovation. I think we've got a huge market. We're training a ton of really brilliant minds in our universities, and so a lot of opportunity for us to export and commercialize that knowledge.
Okay, great. So great answers, great discussion here today. So I hope everybody enjoyed their time here with the panel. So thank you for your time, and thank you to the Global Forum for the ability to do this afternoon.